to our wings, and then, okay?
You know, we're all one.
Honorable pen. One second. Alright. Ready? Honorable panel, the arrogance of the powerful is to believe that we can change the way people are. Particularly when we look at people who we believe to be less powerful than us, using power dynamics, we look at these people and say, oh, these unadvanced people, we can change their lives, let us do so because we are powerful and we can change realities. We stand on government for the rights of indigenous people to self-determine their own development and not outside people to force development upon them in their own definitions. A couple quick model definitions before I get into my speech on why we should be following the Prime Directive. So we all got the context slide on what the Prime Directive is. Just to reiterate, right, we do not interfere with anyone, not with intergalactic spaceflight. This is to say that, like, basically, if a civilization has not reached the threshold to which they have, like, intergalactic spaceflight, meaning they have reached, like, basically our level of understanding. Is it clarification? I'll get you in a second. Basically, where they've reached that civilization, we do not interfere with them. This also means do not interact with them. We do not even appear to them, right? We do not even show our vessel to them, because even showing the vessel would actually, like, show them a different thing. So if someone's in the Bronze Age, we don't show them, like, our space travel age. Clarification?
So for instance, let's say we're escaping Earth in a very traumatic event, and the only place that we can go is to a civilization or a planet with an alien civilization. We would still abide by the Prime Directive even then?
Right, we would, absolutely. So if they have not reached intergalactic space travel, we would not interfere with their life, because we would be bringing a lot of problems, which I am about to get into right here. So the powerful want to intervene into the less powerful for two main reasons. One, we believe that they seek benevolence to indigenous people. We believe this can often be false-centered, because the powerful believe themselves to be exhuming their power onto other people and making them develop faster, right? We can see this in kind of like the aspects of Spanish colonialism in Latin America, how people thought like we're helping these people become more civilized, or literally any form of colonialism where you had people like John Stuart Mill commenting on like British colonization of India, saying like, it's not that Britain is colonizing India, it's that India requires us, right? Like these types of rhetorics where it's benevolence to help the indigenous people. And the other reason is actually full-blown colonialization, which we say leads to things like subjugation, war, plunder, and slavery of indigenous populations, which we have all seen throughout our historical precedents on this planet. We say that the only solution to this problem is to follow the Prime Directive. We say, why do we follow the Prime Directive? There are three main reasons for this. We believe that the Prime Directive should be followed ultimately because we cannot help people. And the first reason for this is because we try to understand people from our being when we actually do not understand them at all, right? It is incorrect to compare your understanding of someone from your own understanding, because what happens is that you have certain developments in your society, whether it's privilege, class, religion, culture, certain things that have led to your development in a certain way. And this kind of creates certain contextual lenses in how you view the world and how you view others. We can see this in kind of what Thomas Rawls talks about in the veil of ignorance, right? Like that only from the veil of ignorance, outside the veil of ignorance, do we actually gain any understanding. But the problem is we oftentimes look through the veil of ignorance and try to understand people, right? But the problem with this is that we don't, because it's very difficult to eliminate our entire lived experience in how we understand people, and that is often the fallacy that leads to what I mentioned earlier about false benevolence leading to aspects of colonialism and the disasters we've seen in our world history. The second reason we cannot help people correctly is we try to understand indigenous people from our perspective, right? We look at this, as I mentioned, through our contextual lens, but let's talk about indigenous people because this pertains more to any like alien life we would encounter in our space travels, right? We believe that this contextual lens would be even worse in space travel, because what happens in space travel is that because they're aliens, they'd be even weirder than our own human-like interactions, right? And so the problem is that there would be even greater like Orientalist ideologies coming from this. We can see this coming from examples like Napoleon in Egypt, right? One of the interesting things about Napoleon's invasion of Egypt was that it wasn't just like a normal colonial war in which they, empires have always like invaded countries, plundered their resources, made off with like slaves and people, and moved on, right? One of the things that Napoleon did was in his invasion, he brought scientists, botanists, and literature people. And what they did is they wrote about Egypt from the West perspective. So they looked at the Egyptians, they looked at their culture, they looked at their religion, and they said, based on our standards, this is what we concur, this is what we believe them to be. This is harmful because it leads to deep-seated misunderstandings in which you are actually defining people based on your standards, and it leads to misunderstandings that lead to colonialism that actually, because you implement policies there. Why is this also bad? We say the third and final reason we cannot help people is that our help actually leads to silencing the indigenous people. We don't understand them, so we make assumptions about them, right? This is this argument comes from like Gayatri Spivak's argument, right? About like how we can't really understand people. We can see this explicitly in the example of the British banning of the sati, like the Indian practice of basically like Indian widow would throw herself on the funeral pyre of her like deceased husband, right? So the British government came into India and basically in 1829 saw this policy and they're like, this is awful, this is terrible, we're going to ban this. There were two negative outcomes from this policy, right? The process of abolishing the practice was used to actually enforce colonial rule because it did two things. One, it maintained men's control of women's lives. It's basically turning like brown men from India, basically brown women from India against brown men in India, and saying that it is the white Britishers who are here to save the more developed, advanced people who have come to identify what is wrong with your civilization and make changes based on our definitions. The second thing it did is it presented British culture in contrast to the savage culture of India. So it is all a sort of mental colonization that happens at an even more deeper and nefarious level when we say that basically a culture is savage, it is less developed than us, and when we do this, we further colonize this group and say that they are beneath us, and hence this group is always looking to us as the colonizers, as this developed force that they have to reach immediately or whatever thing they do. We say that this is wrong on multiple fronts, but mainly we say that people should have the right to self-determine. We believe our most brutal historical legacies are exactly from the misunderstandings that led to the disasters like colonialism, right? Another thing that these things did, why colonialism was such a devastating history, devastating pock on our history, was it hindered the development of these indigenous peoples that we've sought to help, right? It set up colonial oppressors. It set up things that didn't allow them to develop, right? We can see this in Syria. One of the reasons why Syria is so messed up is because the French set up the Assad family, right? It set up colonial oppressors that hindered progress. We can see that our history, our contextualization panel is chronocentric. We believe that change has to happen overnight. We say change takes time. We say people should have the right to do it to maintain their own agency, and that recognize that we are not always right and should not use agencies of power to project onto indigenous people. Let them self-determine.
I'd like to thank